policing the police every single day, and doing what the Charlotte County Sun newspaper and local TV stations won't do every single day. Hey, Charlotte County, this is Charlotte County COPWATCH, and we have been pulling records on this Charlotte County Sheriff Bill Promell, as you know, who is a felon for having a list of gun owners and illegally profiling. Third-degree felony, $5 million fine, and our local state attorney, Meyer Fox, said he's not guilty because the list is not a list. I looked at the definition of list, and a list is a list. So there's another bitch that needs to be charged with the felony also. So here's proof that the Charlotte County Sheriff is policing for profit. We've been pulling tickets. And we pulled tickets from 3/1/2020 before the virus went stupid. And as you can see here, there's 12 pages, 130 tickets in one day. I mean, this is nuts. I mean, I'll just go through them. Anybody can ask for these, by the way. These are, it's called Sunshine Law, make a records request, PRR for all tickets, for the list of tickets written for whatever day you want. And yeah, I screwed up. I should have moved it over here a little bit more. I will move it over here a little bit more, but whatever. So you can see the names. And yeah, there you go. All that policing for profit. But here's what's interesting. What changes is when they know that they can have blowback on them. See, they don't give a shit about you. You know, they'll ruin your life with the ticket. But, you know, when they might be affected with this virus, with the coronavirus, isn't this weird what happens to tickets? There's only 2 pages. So instead of 130 tickets in a day, there's only 13 tickets in a day. So when they have the possibility of getting fucked, isn't that weird? They don't get they don't want to give out tickets because they don't want to get sick. But man, when you're not you know, when they can't get sick, oh man, they have no problems with fucking you over and doing policing for profit. So they can prop up their system, the courts, the judges, the prosecutors, the lawyers. The list is endless and disgusting. So here is your proof. Policing for profit is alive and well in Charlotte County, and the only reason why they're not right now is because there's blowback on them. And the rumor is one of them died, and we do believe it is from the virus because these fuckers will not stop policing for profit. If they got it and died from it, it's called karma, bitch. That is life. They can't hurt anyone anymore. Freedom was planted. Remember what our founding fathers said, take a goddamn country back, and you're a frog in a pot, the water is gone. Get the hell out and fight while you still can.
Hello, my name is James McGlinnis. I'm running for Sheriff of Pinellas County, Florida, and I'm doing this public service announcement to inform people, to inform the public that there's an additional risk that you may be confronting every day that you may not be aware of. Clearly, we understand now that there is a coronavirus, or COVID-19, or C-19 as some people call it, pandemic that's going on. According to the best possible case scenario, over 100,000 people in the United States will lose their lives to this. There has been a huge amount of education and CDC guidelines, government intervention, rules, regulations passed to try and help us do one thing and one thing only. Keep our distances so that we don't get infected. It's called social distancing, and social distancing is something where everybody in the country is being told to shelter in place if they can. Don't go outside unless it's an emergency. Come in contact with as few people as you possibly can, and clearly avoid anybody that may be a major source for such a virus infection. There's also another segment of society that is a huge risk to the public, and no one's talking about it, and that's what this public service announcement is about. That other segment of society that is a huge risk for the public to come in contact with and to come in contact with the public themselves is the police industry. Law enforcement officers all across the country are becoming massively infected because of their unending contact with the public. Now, when I say unending contact, I'm saying that they're not distancing themselves. There's no such thing as a 6 feet spacer between the police and the public. The police have long since been very hands-on when it comes to the public. Stop and frisk is a perfect example. They'll literally just pull up to you because they don't like the way you look. They'll jump out, throw you up against the wall, start digging through your pockets. And this mentality among the police industry, where they think it's okay to grab people, touch them, push them up against the cars, rifle through their pockets, invade their personal space, is something that's quite common. Now, this is a huge problem because the police industry is infecting themselves in huge numbers. More than a fifth of the Detroit Police Department is quarantined due to coronavirus. 2 officers have already died there, and they have at least 38 that have tested positive. According to the New Jersey Highway Patrol, there are over 700 New Jersey Highway Patrol officers that have been tested and are positive for coronavirus. There is the New York Police Commissioner, Dermot Shea, who said Sunday that 4,600 officers, uniformed members, were out sick, accounting for nearly 13% of the department's complete uniformed force. The number of New York City Police Department employees with COVID-19 is expected to reach 900 by Monday. So putting yourself in contact with a police officer, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, is something that is a greater risk to you than contacting an average member of the public. So we have to put into place several guidelines, if you will, on how to deal with a contact with a police officer. And that's what we're going to go through here today. Teaching the public how you can prevent contact, how you can eliminate contact, how you could limit contact, and how you can limit your exposure when being contacted by police. Before we get into the details, I think it's very important that the public knows that there are basically 2 forms of contact with a police officer, either consensual contact or non-consensual contact. If an officer walks up to you and just starts a conversation with you, that's a consensual contact. And that's also a contact that you don't have to have. You're not required to answer the officer's questions. You're not required to engage him in conversation. You're not required to have any contact with him at all. And in that particular case, you might want to say, "Excuse me, officer, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I would like to keep my distance and I would like to have no contact with you because of coronavirus, but thank you for your time," and literally walk away. If the officer persists, then there may be a reason why he's pulling you over, stopping you, or walking up to talk to you. And that's what you have to determine. Is there a legitimate, lawful reason for a police officer to be making contact with you? If you violated some type of a law, if you have some type of civil infraction you've committed, then the officer does have the legal right to make contact with you, and you are being detained. But if you're not sure if you're being detained, then you just need to plain flat out and ask the officer, "Am I being detained?" And if the officer says, "Yes, you are being detained," then you need to ask him, "For what specific crime or infraction am I being detained? What did I do wrong specifically? What crime did I commit?" Now, a lot of times officers will try and literally make up a crime. "Well, you look suspicious," or I was wondering what you were doing here," or "I said we got a call about somebody that looks like you." None of those things are a crime. And that's what you need to assert your rights with the officer by saying, "Well, did I commit a crime? Do you suspect me of committing a crime?" Because if you only have a suspicion, suspicion is not a crime, and I'd like to go. Am I being detained? And again, repeat the question, am I being detained? And the whole purpose there is, as soon as you get to the point where the officer says, "No, I'm not being detained," you walk away. "Thank you very much, officer," and you walk away. You do not continue to have the contact. You keep the distance between you, you keep the conversation to a minimum, and you get the heck away as soon as you possibly can. This is how you can protect yourself from obtaining coronavirus from a police officer. The longer you stay in contact with the officer or anyone, the more opportunity you have to contract the coronavirus from the person you're speaking with. So cut the contact immediately, walk away as soon as you can. Now, the other type of contacts that we have are non-consensual, like when you get pulled over by a policeman. Some of the contact that you will be receiving from police officers will be non-consensual. In other words, you did commit some type of an infraction, which gives them the right to have a conversation with you and also gives them the right to identify you. Now let's get into identification for a moment. Like the consensual contact, if you have not committed any crime, you are under no obligation to show your ID. Police officers have a habit of asking you for ID. They give you the ID stare. Do you have your ID? That's the sign for give me your ID. Now, if you haven't committed a crime, here in Florida, we're not an ID upon demand state, which means that the police officer does not have the legal right to demand that you identify yourself, give your name, or show identification if you have not committed a crime. If an officer is asking you for identification, what you want to do is simply ask them, "Officer, did I commit some type of a crime or infraction? Because here in Florida, I don't have to show you my ID unless I have. Can you please tell me what crime I've committed?" When the officer asks you for identification, you have an obligation to show the officer identification or to give your name if you have in fact committed a crime. If you haven't committed a crime, you're under no obligation to identify yourself, give a name, or to provide identification. What you have to understand is by providing identification, you're creating a risk of it getting infected by coronavirus. You hand your driver's license to the officer, he touches it with his hands, looks at it, maybe brings it back to his car, has a prolonged period of time with it, and then brings it back to you and hands it back to you. You have no idea how many people that officer has touched that day. You have no idea if he's washed his hands. You have no idea if he's arrested other people or come in contact with people with the coronavirus or if he himself has coronavirus. But when he hands you back that driver's license, if he's been infected or if he's a carrier, that driver's license now contains the coronavirus infection and it's now in your hands as well and you're bringing it home with you. So part of this process is to not have any communication back and forth where you're transferring your licenses, a civil infraction, a pen to sign the infraction, or anything that goes between you and the officer. So if you're not required to give identification, then I strongly advise you not to. And if you don't know if you're required to give identification or not, what you need to do is just simply ask the officer, have I committed a crime? If I haven't committed a crime, I'm under no obligation to show my identification. And leave it at that. Just say, I don't want to hand you my identification and possibly risk a coronavirus transfer. And that's a legitimate thing to say to an officer in this day and age. And the officer, if he's reasonable, should not have any problem with that. So now let's go to a traffic stop. You've been pulled over by the officer. You may or may not have done anything wrong. The first thing that you need to understand is the officer's going to ask you to roll the window down. The further you roll the window down, the more likely you will be to receive a coronavirus transfer if the officer is a carrier. So what you want to do is roll the window down maybe 2 inches, just enough to hear what he has to say. Sometimes an officer will go to the passenger side and they'll ask you to roll the window down on the passenger side as well. One of the reasons that they're doing this is so that they can see if they can smell something in your car that gives them probable cause to search your car. But what it also does is it brings the air from the officer through your car, right past your face and out the other window, or back and forth depending on which way the wind is blowing. Leave the passenger window closed, leave all your windows closed, and only roll the window down just enough for you to hear the officer. Now again, sometimes this makes police officers angry, sometimes it makes them upset. But again, the bottom line is you have to tell the officer, I am concerned about contracting coronavirus. I'm going to leave the window up mostly for my own safety. I will speak louder so that you can hear me. That's what you need to do. Now, it is not a lawful command to roll your window all the way down. We don't have to roll the window all the way down. There's no law that requires us to. And so you need to use that measure of protection for yourself. That glass between you and the officer could be the difference between you being infected and you not being infected from the traffic stop. The officer should understand. If the officer does not understand, then you need to let him know that if he persists in exposing you to coronavirus, you're going to have to file a complaint on him. You're not trying to be difficult, you're just trying to keep yourself healthy under these conditions. A reasonable officer should understand that. The next thing that you want to understand is that if the officer does decide to take your identification and does decide to issue you a citation, you can hand the driver's license through the slot in the window. You don't have to sign the citation. And if he hands the stuff back to you, you can either have him drop it in your purse or you can tell him to literally just drop it in the window and let it fall on the floor. Taking it back from the officer will increase your risk of contracting coronavirus. So I would suggest that if the officer does take your license and does bring it back, whatever he wants to hand or transfer you back, he can just drop in the window and let it fall to the floor. Later on when you get home, you can open the door, pick up your driver's license maybe with some gloves, wash everything off, disinfect it, and put it back in your wallet. Another very important point when you're dealing with police officers in today's day and age is to videotape all interactions that you have with an officer. It is not uncommon for a police officer these days to misrepresent the facts or the events that occurred during a traffic stop. And during a traffic stop, you want to make sure that you can evidence and prove that you were perfectly reasonable, that at no point in time were you irate or disrespectful, but that you were just asserting your rights. So every single time that you have an interaction with a police officer, I strongly advise you to get out your phone, turn on record, and just direct it towards the officer as you have these conversations. The evidence that you collect on that phone could be very important. Additionally, when the officer sees that he's being recorded, he's more likely to act in a more reasonable manner, and that's going to be better for everyone involved. The last issue I'd like to discuss with you is the search of your vehicle. A lot of times the officers here in America will come up with a reason to stop you, an air freshener hanging from the window, or supposedly a tail light that doesn't work, or a license frame that's covering a license plate. And most of these reasons are really just a method of pulling you over and giving them an opportunity to try and get inside your car and search it to see if they can find something to arrest you for. This is basically an unlawful stop, and it's an unconstitutional search, but they get around the rules by fabricating the probable cause. So if you do get pulled over, you obviously don't want to have a police officer searching through your car. You've seen them do it on TV, you've seen them do it on live PD. They go through everything. They open up your console, they go through your truck, they touch all your things, they're climbing in and out of your car. Sometimes they'll have their dog in and out of your car as well. And all of these contacts, all of these searches inside your car obviously increase the risk of having coronavirus left on one of the surfaces of your automobile from the police officer. Again, you don't know who these police officers have arrested, who they've touched, whether they've washed their hands, or anything about those particular officers, or whether or not they themselves are infected. So clearly, having them inside your vehicle, having anyone that's a carrier of coronavirus inside your vehicle, is a huge risk to both yourself and your family. So basically what they'll start by saying is, do you have anything in your car that we should know about? And what you need to do is respond to them, I'm sorry, officer, I don't answer questions. You have the right to not answer questions. Again, remember, we're trying to limit the time that's taken in the stop. We're trying to limit the contact. We're trying to limit the communications. So if the officer asks you if you have anything in your car, simply say, I'm sorry, I don't answer any questions. If they ask you, do you mind if we have a look? What you don't want to do is give them consent to search your car. If you give them consent, then you're risking the contamination. The bottom line here is they may search your car anyway, but you're not going to make it easier for them by just saying, yeah, sure, go ahead and do it. Contaminate my car. See if I care. You should care. So when you tell the officer, no, I'm sorry, I do not consent to a search, he will do one of two things. Either try and fabricate probable cause to search your car, or just call it a day. And that's going to be a coin toss for you. But if you do not let the officer search your car, there's one thing I do know for a fact, and that is you're at less risk of coronavirus infection from the police officer if the officer is not inside your car. So it's a simple process. I don't answer questions. I don't give consent for searches. And let the officer do whatever it is he's going to do from that point. But you've done everything that you possibly can to not obtain coronavirus from a traffic stop or a police contact. Now, unfortunately, we have to go through these steps, but you're also protecting the officers as well. You may be a carrier yourself. Police officers and police agencies should be training themselves not to have these types of contacts, these unnecessary contacts that create an additional coronavirus potential infection by having officers contact citizens when it's not really necessary, by having them touch things when it's not really necessary, by having them invade your personal space or invade your vehicle when it's not really necessary. So whether the officer has the foresight or the intelligence or the training to not invade your space and potentially infect you or not, you have an obligation to try and protect yourself, protect your space, protect your vehicle, protect your property, and protect your lives. I hope this vehicle has been a help to you. My name is James McGlinnis. I'm running for sheriff of Pinellas County, and when I am sheriff, all of my officers are going to be trained to not have these unnecessary contacts, these unnecessary risks to both our officers and our citizens. Thank you for your time today.
Hey Sheriff County, this is Sheriff County COPWATCH. I am using any video here with under fair use if you have criticism, reporting, teaching, etc. And please donate. I do not make money from YouTube, and there are different ways to donate in the video links. Thanks.